The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest structure ever built by any species in the known universe. It floated in orbit above the sacred neutral world of Prime, a massive station that could hold millions of beings from across the stars. Today, representatives from 300 different alien civilizations had gathered in its central hall. The air was thick with tension, and even the most ancient species present could feel that something important was about to happen. High Arbiter Han of the species rose slowly from his hovering throne. He was an impressive being, standing nearly 3 meters tall with pale blue skin and 4 eyes that glowed with soft golden light. His people had founded the Galactic Council over 10,000 years ago, and he had served as its leader for the past 2 centuries. In all that time, he had never felt as uncomfortable as he did at this moment. "The vote has been cast," Han announced. His voice was deep and carried easily through the vast chamber, translated instantly into hundreds of languages by the sophisticated systems built into every seat. By a margin of 273 to 27, the Galactic Council has decided to expel the species known as humanity from all Council territories, trade agreements, and diplomatic relations. They are hereby declared unwelcome throughout civilized space. In the observation gallery high above the main floor, Ambassador Laura stood completely still. She was a woman in her late 40s with dark hair streaked with and eyes that had seen more than most humans her age. She had spent 15 years building relationships with alien species, learning their customs, earning their trust. Now, in a single vote, all of that work had been destroyed. Her aide, a young diplomat named Porter, gripped the metal railing so hard that his knuckles turned white. He was only 28 years old, fresh from the diplomatic academy on Earth, and this was supposed to be the beginning of his career. Instead, he was watching its end. "This cannot be happening," whispered. "We did everything right, we followed every rule." Behind them, Captain Daniel Hayes of the diplomatic escort vessel Endurance watched the proceedings with narrowed eyes. He was a military man, trained to assess threats and respond to danger. Right now, every instinct he had was screaming that they were in trouble. Laura finally spoke, her voice quiet but steady. "This is a mistake. They will realize that soon enough." She looked down at the alien delegates below. The ambassador, a being named Os who had once called himself humanity's friend, refused to meet her gaze. They had shared meals together. Their children had played together during diplomatic functions. Now he could not even look at her. The delegation, a group of creatures with shimmering wings and compound eyes, chittered nervously among themselves. They had traded with Earth's colonies for 50 years. Human technology had helped them cure diseases that had plagued their species for generations. They had voted against humanity anyway. Even the large furry beings whose entire had been saved by human medical teams during the terrible Scarlet Plague had voted for expulsion. Laura remembered standing in their parliament, receiving their highest honor for the sacrifice of human doctors who had died helping them. That medal now felt like a cruel joke. The charges against humanity were many, but none of them made real sense. Humans bred too quickly, the council said, even though their population growth was slower than half the species present. Humans were too aggressive, they claimed, despite the fact that humanity had never started a single war in space. Human technology advanced at an alarming rate, which was somehow a crime rather than an achievement. But the real reason, the one nobody would say out loud, was simple. Humanity refused to submit to the genetic modification protocols that the Council demanded. These protocols would alter human DNA, making them calmer, more obedient, more compatible with galactic civilization. The Council called it a gift. Humanity called it slavery. "We will not change who we are," Laura had told them during the debates. "We will not let you rewrite our very nature." That defiance had sealed their fate. Ambassador of the Dominion of watched the human delegation from across the chamber. He was a reptilian being with dark green scales and yellow eyes that held no warmth. His species had pushed hardest for humanity's expulsion, spending decades spreading fear and lies about the newcomers from Earth. Thin lips curved into something that might have been a smile. With the troublesome humans removed from galactic politics, certain plans could finally move forward. Plans that had been delayed for 40 years because humanity kept interfering, kept asking questions, kept standing up for weaker species. The Dominion was patient. They had waited a long time for this moment. Soon, the galaxy would belong to them, and there would be no one left to stop them. High Arbiter Han continued speaking, outlining the terms of humanity's expulsion. They had 72 standard hours to vacate all Council space. Any human found in Council territory after that time would be arrested. All trade agreements were canceled. All diplomatic relationships were ended. Humanity was to be treated as if they did not exist. Laura turned to her small delegation. Her face showed no emotion, but inside her heart was breaking. She had believed in the promise of the stars. She had believed that different species could work together, learn from each other, build something greater than any of them could achieve alone. That dream was dying today. She said quietly, "Send word to Earth. Tell them what happened here. Tell them to prepare." "Prepare for what?" asked. "For whatever comes next." Captain Hayes stepped forward. "Ambassador, we should leave now. I do not trust these beings to honor even the 72 hours they promised." Laura nodded. She took one last look at the Grand Chamber, at the hundreds of alien faces that refused to meet her eyes. These species had been humanity's partners, their friends, their allies. Now they were strangers. As the human delegation walked toward the exit, the chamber was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. It was as if the entire council was holding its breath, waiting for the humans to finally disappear. What none of them understood, what they could not possibly know, was that humanity had been preparing for this moment for a very long time. Not because they wanted it, but because they had learned a hard lesson long ago on their own world. Trust had to be earned, friendship had to be proven, and those who relied entirely on the kindness of strangers often found themselves alone when it mattered most. Earth had hoped for the best, but Earth had also prepared for the worst. As Laura stepped through the doors of the Galactic Council for the last time, she did not look back. There was nothing left to see. The future was ahead, in the darkness between the stars, where humanity would have to find its own way. The Council had cast them out. They believed they were removing a threat. They had no idea that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. 3 months had passed since the Galactic Council expelled humanity from civilized space. In that short time, the human species had accomplished something that most aliens believed was impossible. They had moved 12 billion people from 17 colony worlds to new homes in the outer reaches of the galaxy. The worlds they settled were places that no other species wanted. Frozen wastelands where temperatures dropped below anything most aliens could survive. Burning deserts where the sun scorched the ground for 18 hours a day. Rocky moons with thin atmospheres and constant meteor showers. The Council had looked at these places and seen nothing of value. Humanity looked at them and saw opportunity. Admiral Cole stood on the bridge of the carrier Resolute, watching the last transport ships cross the invisible line that marked the edge of Council territory. She was 63 years old, with silver hair cut short, and a face that showed the marks of 4 decades of military service. She had fought in Earth's last ground war before humanity reached the stars. She had commanded ships against pirates and raiders. She had escorted diplomats and protected colonies. Nothing in her long career had prepared her for this moment. "That is the last of them," her executive officer reported. Commander Price was a tall man in his 40s with dark skin and calm eyes that never seemed to show fear. He had served under for 15 years, and she trusted him completely. Every human being is now outside Council space. "Good." Turn to face the tactical display that floated in the center of the bridge. It showed a map of the galaxy, with different colors marking the territory of various species. The vast blue region that had once included human colonies was now empty of their presence. Now show me what our former friends have been doing. Touched a control, and the display changed. Red markers appeared across the map, showing the movements of alien fleets over the past 90 days. Studied them carefully, her experienced eyes picking out patterns that others might miss. The Dominion has been gathering ships here, said, pointing to a cluster of red dots near the border of space. They claim it is a training exercise, but their fleet is 10 times larger than any exercise would require. And the others? They have pulled their defensive fleets back to their core worlds. They say it is for maintenance, but our intelligence suggests they are afraid. Highlighted another region of the map. They has reported increased pirate activity in their shipping lanes. Ships are disappearing without explanation. Studied the display for a long moment. The pattern was obvious to anyone willing to see it. The Dominion had not pushed for humanity's expulsion because they feared humans. They had done it because humans were the only species in the Council willing to stand against their expansion. For 40 years, humanity had served as an unofficial protector of the weaker species. Human ships had escorted merchant convoys through dangerous territory. Human doctors had traveled to distant worlds to fight diseases that threatened entire populations. Human engineers had helped rebuild colonies destroyed by natural disasters. Human soldiers had stood beside a dozen different species against Dominion aggression. Every time humanity had paid a price, lives lost, resources spent, and for all of that sacrifice they had received nothing but suspicion and fear from the very beings they protected. Now that protection was gone. They thought we were the threat, said quietly. They never saw the real danger sitting right next to them. Nodded slowly. We tried to warn them. For years we told them what the Dominion was planning. We showed them evidence. We begged them to prepare. They did not listen. No, they did not. She walked to the viewport and looked out at the stars. Somewhere in the distance, she could see the faint glow of human colonies. New cities being built on harsh worlds. Factories rising from barren ground. Children being born who would never know what it felt like to live under the Council's authority. Perhaps that was not such a bad thing. What do we do now? Asked. Do we try to rebuild relationships with the Council? Do we reach out to individual species? Was quiet for a long time before answering. She thought about Laura, who had spent her entire career trying to build bridges between humans and aliens. She thought about Porter, whose promising future had been destroyed by prejudice and fear. She thought about the millions of humans who had worked hard to be good neighbors, good partners, good friends. All of that effort had been thrown away in a single vote. We wait, she said finally. We watch, we build. Build what? Turned back to face her executive officer. Her eyes were hard, but not with anger. They were hard with purpose. Everything they told us we could not have. Ships that their technology cannot match. Weapons that their scientists say are impossible. An economy that does not depend on their trade routes or their resources. She walked back to the center of the bridge and looked at the map again. The Council controlled most of the galaxy, but there was still plenty of room in the places they had abandoned. Room for humanity to grow. Room for humanity to prepare. One day, continued, they will realize their mistake. The Dominion will show its true face, and the Council will be too weak to stop them. When that day comes, they will remember the species they cast aside. They will come begging for help. And what will we do then? Thought about the question carefully. She thought about the ambassador who could not meet Laura's eyes. She thought about the who had traded with Earth for 50 years and still voted for expulsion. She thought about the who wore the medals humanity had earned and then stabbed them in the back. It would be easy to hate them. It would be simple to let them suffer the consequences of their own choices. Part of her wanted exactly that. But Cole had not become an admiral, by taking the easy path. When they come asking for help, she said slowly, we will have to decide what kind of people we want to be. Do we become like them? Do we let our fear and anger control us? Or do we remember who we are? Considered her words, that will not be an easy choice. No, it will not. Looked out at the stars one more time. But we have time, time to think, time to prepare, time to remember that we are better than our worst impulses. She turned back to her crew, the men and women who had followed her into exile without complaint. They were good people, strong people. They deserved a leader who was worthy of their trust. For now, said, we focus on our own, we build our new worlds, we raise our children. We create something that the council could never give us. What is that? Asked. Smiled, the first real smile she had shown in months. A future that belongs to us, and when the galaxy finally burns, we will be ready. 1 year after humanity's expulsion, the galaxy began to burn. The Dominion launched their invasion of space on a day that the species celebrated as the Festival of Wings. It was a holiday when families gathered together, when the great hive cities were filled with music and joy. The Dominion had chosen this day on purpose. They wanted to send a message. The Dominion fleet arrived without warning. 400 warships appeared from faster-than-light travel directly above the. They did not ask for surrender. They did not make demands. They simply began firing. They had a defense fleet, but it was small and poorly equipped. For centuries, they had relied on the Galactic Council to protect them. They had trusted that civilized species did not attack each other without cause. That trust cost them everything. The battle lasted less than 6 hours. When it was over, the defense fleet was destroyed, and Dominion troops were landing in the burning ruins of cities that had stood for 10,000 years. The Queen, an ancient being who had ruled her people with wisdom and kindness, sent desperate messages to the Galactic Council. She begged for help. She pleaded for intervention. She reminded them of treaties and promises and obligations. The Council's response was slow and confused. High Arbiter hand called emergency meetings. Delegates argued about proper procedures. Committees were formed to study the situation. By the time a relief fleet was finally authorized, 3 billion were dead. But the Dominion was not finished. Even as they consolidated their hold on space, their fleets moved toward new targets. The colonies on the outer rim, the mining stations in the asteroid belts, smaller species that had no fleets and no defenses. One by one they fell. On a harsh world that humans had named Haven's Rest, Dr. Maria Santos worked 18 hours a day treating the survivors. She was a small woman in her 50s with tired eyes and gentle hands that had healed thousands of patients over her long career. Her clinic had been built to serve a few thousand human colonists. Now it was treating tens of thousands of refugees from across the galaxy. They came first, their shimmering wings torn and their compound eyes dull with grief. Then came their fur matted with blood and their deep voices broken by loss. Even some arrived, dissidents who had spoken against their government's cowardice and been forced to flee. Maria treated them all. She did not ask what species they were. She did not check whether they had voted for humanity's expulsion. She simply saw beings in pain and did everything in her power to help them. One evening, as she was finishing her rounds, an elderly stopped her in the corridor. He was one of the first refugees to arrive, a historian who had devoted his life to preserving his people's memory. His compound eyes, once brilliant blue, had faded with age and sorrow. "May I ask you something?" he said through the translator device that hung around his neck. Maria nodded, though she was exhausted and wanted nothing more than to sleep. "Why do you help us?" The question caught her off guard. "Because you need help." "But your council cast you out." The old's voice cracked with confusion. "We voted against you. My own people voted against you. We said terrible things about humans. We believed the lies the Dominion told us. Why do you not hate us?" Maria was quiet for a moment. She thought about her daughter, who lived on Earth with her own family. She thought about her patients, beings from species she had never met before who trusted her with their lives. She thought about the choice that every human faced when dealing with those who had wronged them. Because hating you would not help anyone, she said finally. It would not bring back your dead. It would not rebuild your cities. It would not stop the Dominion from hurting more people. But surely you want revenge. Your species is known for being emotional, for holding grudges. Maria almost laughed. We are emotional. We do hold grudges. But we also know that the universe is bigger than our pain. If we let our anger control us, we become no better than the beings who hurt us. The old stared at her with those faded eyes. I do not understand you. I have studied 1,000 species across 10,000 years, and I do not understand humans. That is okay, Maria said gently. We do not always understand ourselves either, but we try to be better. Every day we try. Across human space, similar scenes played out. The harsh worlds that humanity had been forced to settle became sanctuaries for the displaced. Human ships, officially forbidden from entering Council space, somehow appeared at exactly the right moment to escort refugee convoys through dangerous territory. Human engineers helped rebuild shattered colonies. Human soldiers trained resistance fighters to defend their homes. The Council noticed these activities. High Arbiter had sent formal protests to Earth, demanding that humanity cease its interference in galactic affairs. The protests were politely received and completely ignored. President Samuel Wright addressed the Council's complaints in a speech that was broadcast across all human worlds. They expelled us from their organization, he said, his voice calm but firm. They told us we were not welcome among civilized species, but they did not expel us from the universe. They did not expel our compassion, and they certainly did not expel our conscience. The president was a man in his 60s with hair and kind eyes that had seen too much suffering. He had grown up on one of Earth's continents, worked his way through school, and devoted his life to public service. He believed in humanity's potential for goodness, even when evidence suggested otherwise. We will not abandon those in need, he continued, not because we expect thanks, not because we want something in return, but because it is the right thing to do. That is who we are. That is who we will always be. The Dominion watched humanity's actions with growing unease. Lord Regent, now ruler of an empire that stretched across a quarter of the galaxy, could not understand what he was seeing. They should be broken, he hissed to his military commanders in the dark halls of his palace. They were cast out and humiliated. They should be angry. They should be weak. Why do they keep helping others? Why do they not despair? His commanders had no answer. They understood power. They understood fear. They understood conquest and domination and the satisfaction of crushing those weaker than themselves. They did not understand humans. What they did not know, what they could not see, was that humanity was preparing for something. In the outer reaches of the galaxy, away from Council observation, human scientists and engineers were building things that should have been impossible. Ships faster and stronger than anything the Dominion had ever seen. Weapons that could crack planets. Defenses that could stop entire fleets. Humanity hoped they would never need to use these things. They prayed for peace, even as they prepared for war. But deep in their hearts they knew the truth. The Dominion would not stop, the Council would not act, and sooner or later the darkness would come for them too. When that day arrived, humanity would be ready. 3 years after the expulsion, the Dominion made its final mistake. Lord Regent had grown confident in his power. His fleets had conquered half the galaxy. The Galactic Council was paralyzed by fear and indecision. Species that had once been proud and independent now bowed before him, paying tribute and begging for mercy. He believed himself invincible. Only one thing troubled him: the humans. They had not collapsed after their expulsion, as he had expected. Instead, They had grown stronger. Their colonies thrived on worlds that should have been uninhabitable. Their ships traveled freely through regions the Dominion could not control. And worst of all, they continued to help everyone who asked, building alliances that no amount of Dominion propaganda could break. Decided that the human problem needed to be solved permanently. He chose Haven's Rest as his target. It was the largest human colony in the outer reaches, home to 3 million humans and nearly 10 million refugees from across the galaxy. More importantly, it had become a symbol of human defiance, a symbol of hope for those who still resisted Dominion rule. Destroying it would send a message that no one could ignore. The invasion fleet consisted of 400 warships, including the massive flagship Eternal Dominion. It was enough firepower to destroy most species entirely. Expected a quick victory, perhaps some token resistance before the humans fled or surrendered. He even prepared a speech to deliver over their broken world. What he did not expect was Admiral Cole. The human fleet appeared from faster-than-light travel just as the Dominion ships were entering the Haven's Rest system. They emerged from the darkness like ghosts, their hulls painted black, their weapons already charging. There were only 80 human ships. The Dominion commanders laughed when they saw the numbers, 400 against 80. The outcome seemed obvious. Then the human ships began to move. They were faster than anything the Dominion had ever seen. They twisted and turned through the Dominion formation like dancers at a ball, avoiding fire that should have destroyed them. Their weapons cut through Dominion shields as if they were made of paper. Ships that had conquered entire civilizations exploded in seconds. Commander Price, now captain of the destroyer Vigilance, led a squadron of fast attack ships directly into the heart of the Dominion fleet. His crew was young and eager, trained for 3 years for exactly this moment. "Target their command ships first," ordered, his voice calm despite the chaos around him. "Take out their eyes and ears, make them blind." The Vigilance dove through a storm of weapons fire, spinning and rolling to avoid the deadly beams. Its guns blazed continuously, tearing holes in Dominion hulls. Behind it, the rest of the squadron followed in perfect formation. On the bridge of the Resolute, Admiral Cole watched the battle unfold on her tactical display. She had spent 40 years learning how to fight. She had studied every Dominion tactic, every weakness, every mistake they had made in their centuries of conquest. And she had trained her people to exploit every single one. "All ships execute Pattern Delta," she commanded. "Drive them toward the asteroid field." The human fleet moved as one, herding the confused Dominion ships toward a region of space filled with tumbling rocks and hidden dangers. The Dominion captains, trained to fight in open space, found themselves trapped in an environment they did not understand. Human ships darted among the asteroids, using the rocks as cover and shields. They appeared from nowhere, fired devastating volleys, and disappeared before the Dominion could respond. One by one, the great warships of the Dominion fleet fell silent. The battle lasted 6 hours. When it was finally over, 312 Dominion ships were drifting wreckage. Human losses totaled 17 vessels. The flagship Eternal Dominion tried to flee, its engines burning at maximum power. Captain Daniel Hayes, commanding the cruiser Guardian, led the pursuit. His ship had been designed for exactly this purpose, faster and more maneuverable than anything the Dominion had built. "You are not going anywhere," Daniel said quietly as his weapons locked onto the fleeing flagship. The Eternal Dominion's engines exploded in a brilliant flash of light. The massive ship tumbled through space, powerless and helpless. Dominion soldiers aboard began sending surrender signals. Admiral Cole's voice came through the communication system, reaching every ship in both fleets. "All Dominion vessels, this is Admiral Cole of the Human Defense Force. Your fleet is destroyed. Your flagship is disabled. You will lower your weapons and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be met with immediate destruction." There was a long moment of silence. Then, one by one, the surviving Dominion ships began to power down their weapons. The Battle of Haven's Rest was over. Humanity had won. News of the victory spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Species that had watched helplessly as the Dominion conquered their neighbors suddenly saw a different possibility. The invincible conquerors could be beaten. The tide could be turned. On Prime, the Galactic Council convened an emergency session. The same delegates who had voted to expel humanity now faced an uncomfortable truth. The only force in the galaxy capable of stopping the Dominion was the species they had cast out. High Arbiter Han looked decades older than he had 3 years ago. The weight of his failures pressed down on him like a physical burden. He had believed the Dominion's lies. He had helped remove humanity from the Council. And because of that decision, billions of beings had died. "We must reach out to the humans," he told the assembled delegates. "We must ask for their help." "Ask?" Ambassador's holographic image flickered with barely contained rage. He was the only high-ranking Dominion official still free, hiding somewhere in the outer territories. "You would grovel before those primitives." A delegate stood up, her fur bristling with anger. "Those primitives just destroyed 2/3 of your invasion fleet. Those primitives have been protecting our refugees while your species hunted them down. Perhaps it is time we reconsidered who the real primitives are." The vote was called. This time, the result was overwhelming. 291 species voted to formally request humanity's assistance. Only the Dominion and its closest allies opposed. The message reached Earth within hours. President Samuel Wright read it in his office, surrounded by his closest advisors. Laura was there, the same ambassador who had witnessed the expulsion. So was Admiral Cole, participating via video link from her flagship. "They want our help," the president said quietly. "After everything they did to us, they want our help." "We should let them suffer," one advisor suggested. "Let them see what life is like without us." "We could demand concessions," another said. "Make them pay for what they did." Samuel Wright was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the window at the city beyond, the tall buildings and busy streets of a civilization that had survived its darkest hours. He thought about all the choices that had brought humanity to this point. Then he thought about the elder in Maria Santos's clinic, asking why humans helped those who had wronged them. "Send our response," the president said finally. His voice was steady and sure. "Tell them we are coming. No conditions, no demands. We will help them because they need help and because that is who we are." Laura smiled for the first time in years. "I will deliver the message personally." "Good." Samuel Wright stood up and faced his advisors. "We did not survive exile by becoming like those who cast us out. We survived by being better, and we will end this war the same way." Humanity was going back to the stars, but this time they were not asking for permission. The final campaign against the Dominion lasted 18 months. It was the largest military operation in galactic history, involving ships and soldiers from nearly every species that had ever traveled among the stars. Human fleets led the way, their advanced ships cutting through Dominion defenses like knives through soft cloth. Behind them came vessels from the, and dozens of other species. Former enemies now fought side by side, united by a common purpose and led by beings they had once rejected. Captain Daniel Hayes commanded a joint task force of human and vessels. Together, they broke the Dominion siege of the. Daniel had never imagined working alongside the furry aliens who had voted for humanity's expulsion, but war had a way of changing perspectives. "Hard to port," he ordered as Dominion missiles streaked toward his ship. "Return fire on their command vessel." The captain on the ship beside him, a grizzled veteran named R, echoed the command to his own crew. Their ships moved together in perfect coordination, a dance of destruction that the Dominion could not match. When it was finally liberated, its people flooded into the streets. They cheered for the other council species, but they cheered loudest for the humans. The same beings they had cast aside were now their saviors. Dr. Maria Santos established field hospitals that followed the advancing fleets. Her staff had grown to include nurses, surgeons, and doctors from a dozen other species. They treated wounded soldiers without asking what uniform they wore or what color their skin was. One night, as Maria was treating a badly injured Dominion soldier, a nurse questioned her. "Why do you save him? His people killed billions of mine." Maria continued working, her hands steady despite her exhaustion. "Because he is hurt. Because I can help. Because if we only save those we agree with, we become no better than those we fight against." The nurse was silent for a long moment. Then she stepped forward and began assisting Maria. Nothing more needed to be said. The final assault on the Dominion capital was led by Admiral Cole herself. Her fleet had grown from 80 ships to over 1,000, representing every species in the Alliance. They gathered at the edge of Dominion space, a wall of steel and light that stretched across the stars. "All ships," said, her voice broadcast to every vessel in the fleet. "This is the moment we have prepared for. Today, we end the threat that has haunted this galaxy for too long. Today, we fight not for revenge, but for a future where no species will ever be conquered again." The fleet moved forward as one. The battle for the Dominion was fierce. The Dominion fought with the desperation of those who knew they had nothing left to lose. Their orbital defenses were formidable, their ground troops numerous, their will to survive unbroken. But they could not match humanity's determination. Price led a squadron of destroyers through the Dominion's last defensive line, his ships taking damage that would have crippled any vessel from 3 years ago. Human engineering had created ships that could survive almost anything. "Push through," ordered. "Clear a path for the landing craft." Behind him, transports filled with soldiers from a dozen species prepared to descend to the surface. Human Marines would fight alongside warriors and scouts, old enemies becoming new brothers in the fire of combat. When the Dominion Palace finally fell, Admiral Cole was there to accept Lord Regent's surrender personally. The once proud ruler was brought before her in chains, his scales dull and his eyes empty. "You should kill me," he hissed as guards held him in place. "That is what we would have done to you. That is what any strong species does to its enemies." Looked at him for a long moment. She thought about all the suffering he had caused, all the lives lost, all the worlds burned. It would be easy to order his death. Part of her wanted to. "That is why you lost," she said quietly. "You never understood that strength is not about destroying others. It is about building something worth protecting." She turned to her guards. "Take him to face justice. He will answer for his crimes before a court of all species. The galaxy will decide his fate, not any one person." The war was over. The Dominion was broken, and humanity had proven itself to be something far more powerful than anyone had imagined. In the aftermath of victory, the Galactic Council offered humanity everything they had once been. Full membership, with a permanent seat on the High Council, formal recognition as a guardian species, with the right to intervene anywhere in the galaxy where innocent beings were threatened. Apologies and honors and promises that things would be different now. President Samuel Wright's response surprised everyone who did not truly understand humans. "We are grateful for the offer," he told the assembled delegates on Prime. Ambassador Laura stood beside him, her eyes bright with emotion. "But we must decline." The chamber erupted in confusion. Decline, after everything they had sacrificed. Wright raised his hand for silence. When the noise died down, he spoke again. "For 40 years before our expulsion, we tried to earn your acceptance. We were patient. We were helpful. We followed your rules. And when it mattered most, you threw us away because we were different. He paused, letting his words settle over the assembled beings. We learned something in exile. We learned that we do not need your approval to know our own worth. We do not need your membership to know who we are. Laura stepped forward. We will remain your allies. We will continue to trade, to cooperate, to build together. But we will do so as equals, not as supplicants begging for scraps from your table. We will protect the innocent wherever they are found. We will stand against tyranny in all its forms, and we will do it on our own terms. The galaxy watched in silence as the human delegation departed. They did not understand. How could any species refuse such honors? How could anyone walk away from power freely offered? But in the refugee camps of Haven's Rest, they understood. In the rebuilt cities they understood. In the hospitals and schools and communities where humans had worked and sacrificed without asking for anything in return, they understood. Humanity was not interested in ruling the galaxy. They were interested in making it better. Years passed. The Galactic Council reformed itself, learning from the mistakes that had nearly destroyed it. The Dominion slowly healed, its people taught to value cooperation over conquest. New species joined the galactic community, and they were welcomed not with suspicion but with open arms. And humanity, they continued as they always had, building, growing, helping, ready to stand against any darkness that threatened the light. On Haven's Rest, now a thriving world of millions from 100 species, a monument was built at the site of the Great Battle. It was a simple structure, a pillar of white stone rising toward the stars. Its inscription was written in every language of the galaxy. They cast us out. We came back anyway, not for revenge, for everyone. Admiral Cole, retired now and with age, visited the monument on its dedication day. Commander Price stood beside her, his own hair now showing streaks of white. "Do you think they finally understand us?" he asked. Watched a group of children playing nearby. Human children, children and children, all laughing together, all equal, all free. "Some of them," she said, "the rest will learn." She smiled, the warm smile of someone who had seen the worst of the universe and still believed in its potential for good. "We have time." And the galaxy, which had once trembled at the thought of human aggression, now trembled at something far more powerful. The unshakable human belief that tomorrow could always be better than today. That kindness was stronger than cruelty. That the universe, for all its darkness, was worth fighting for. One act of stubborn compassion at a time.